My name is Mark Christensen. This is my session 2 explicit teaching and instructional strategies presentations for Special Education 517 for Colorado Christian University. First, the purpose of the presentation is on explicit teaching principles in the 4 instructional domains with a minimum of 2 strategies that can be used in a classroom for each principal domain covered in my assigned readings. Also, as I outlined in my session 2 math lesson plan on the Bermuda Triangle. 6 principles of explicit instruction include engage time on task, make sure it's organized, make sure you can complete the task, and don't make it overburdensome on the children. Make sure that one session leads into the next, one lesson leads into the next lesson. High levels of success, I always ensure with high risk students, at-risk students that I work with who usually have a lot of integration issues and low IQs, that they have high levels of success immediately. That means I give them standardized check pluses for just getting stuff done. So usually every task takes everywhere from 2 to 3 minutes, no more than 5 to 7 minutes without teacher instruction or engagement. Content coverage and opportunity to learn should be well outlined, not only from the textbook they use on the Bermuda Triangle, but also all the accessory stuff that you bring in, from compasses to geometry materials and access. They should have 24 access to that 24/7 throughout their engagement in the content and the lesson plans. Grouping for the instruction. Students achieve more in classes than when they spend much time on being directly taught by their teachers. That means everything I do, they do. Everything they do, I do. It's always modeled, and I always am floating around the route. Everything's scaffolded. It's also part of a routine instruction where I deliberately lead the book. They write the book. They dictate the facts of the book in the Bermuda Triangle. And then, as is the purpose of this course, and as detailed in my lesson plan, they graph it. They graph it by putting it on a geographical map using compasses, distances, longitude, latitude, and different mathematical computations related to their general math. And number 6, addressing different forms of knowledge. And I did this from declarative to factual, which I'll go into more later, procedural, and how something is done, from applying what their facts they got from the book, from where and when did an event occur in the Bermuda Triangle, to procedure on how to put it on a map and trace the facts and say, is this possible? Is this myth? Is this fact? And so on. And conditional, when and when not to use a skill. When can you use these skills realistically? Can you geographically map something by having longitude and latitude, etc.? 4 domains of teaching responsibility, which I take extremely seriously after 25 years inside a special education classroom, mostly working with at-risk kids at faculty at facility schools. But the 4 domains of teaching responsibility for me is the framework of being planned, being prepared. Therefore, I like to always use like a textbook and the reading book that the children and the students can have. Classroom environment should always be clean, uncluttered, and everything they should have free access to, from staplers, equipment, and in this case, access to their calculators, access to secondary assistive technologies that will help them with their computational difficulties, have access to scissors, have access to maps, have access to supplementary material, even if it's just a map, even if it's just a book on geography, etc. Always provide them constant, consistent, well-planned instruction, prompts, positive encouragement, even when they drift off course, and always follow professional responsibility. All 4 domains I'll go into more detail here. Planning and preparation is key requirement. The instructional design includes learning activities that are well sequenced and required all students to think, problem solve, inquire, and defend conjectures and opinions. So with the Bermuda Triangle, the instructional design, it comes from a textbook. The activities that are well sequenced are sequenced from chapter to chapter. Yes, they're supposed to map, find the areas, longitude, latitude, do the mathematical computations of distances covered and required in time, and compare the data to see if the data and the map data square up. And that's where students are expected to think, problem solve, and inquire. And then they have to defend their opinions. Like, did it take place in the Bermuda Triangle? Is what's being reported true or not? The measures of student learning align with the curriculum. Always have good outcomes. I always have short-term soft teaching method outcomes for special education students. Even I measure their effort. Everything gets a check plus if they go through the process required. Follow the reading, do the writing, dictate their facts. That's 3 checks, check pluses. And if they struggle at understanding the process, you still give them a check for effort, so you move them on. Enabling students to demonstrate their understanding in more than one way. Therefore, you allow students to not only just write, but maybe draw, maybe share orally. Some days they may not be up to writing down an entire paragraph, but are able to verbally explain. Therefore. So having an adapted approach to planning preparation helps tons in this environment. The classroom environment, as I always consider myself an effective teacher because my classrooms are set up to use the physical space and all the items in it effectively. Make sure the students have their proper space. Make sure they're able to go to the community table and work with others and work with staff and to get assistance where they need. Make sure it's an open policy where a student doesn't feel crowded or encroached upon. Make sure that the classroom, as I mentioned earlier, is organized and they have easy access to equipment and other things to access the content, so that in the end, the student is able to get their higher level. What is higher level for one student may not be another. What is functional for another may be below. What may be below for another may be way too below. So it's always good to have a classroom environment set up to allow students of different abilities and interest levels to succeed. Instruction, this is where it falls completely on the teacher. The teacher, it is our responsibility to give constructive feedback and encouragement, even if you have a disengaged student, to always understand this, to find different ways to make sure that at least they get some of the content and they have access to the content after the fact. For example, all the work they do, I do, and it's made accessible in a notebook, which they know they can access. They'll have a hard copy on their own desk, placed in their own binder, and therefore. So it's my responsibility as an instructor to give the student feedback and say, these are the consequences for this and that, and this is what we were supposed to cover. Because usually when a student shuts down, when they come out of their emotional disengagement, they're able to re-engage, and you're there to do that, and giving them the proper feedback and the opportunities and the doorways to re-enter the subject is key. But in the end, I always say, as you can see right here, I have students always have to take responsibility. Next one is professional responsibility, which is the last of the fourth after classroom environment. Is here it is right here, instruction. Have the student take responsibility, but in the end, we move on. Here we go. Professional responsibility. Accomplished teachers have a high ethical standard and a deep sense of professionalism. Therefore, you treat all your students the same, regardless of levels. You record what they do or don't do. You give complex, explicit notes to people who may or may not be engaged. Understand cultural sensitivity, understand disability sensitivity, and don't make that a constant draw for students, because you can create a negative culture within your room. So as a professional responsibility special education teacher, my role as leader is paramount. Positivity, constantly moving forward, constantly revisiting subject matters in a scaffolded way in which the students feel that they understand that they got something out of the lesson plan and that everything has a sequential sense of relevance. So strategy number one, classroom environment. The classroom should have a topic, engaging visuals and magazines. So in this case, the Bermuda Triangle, nothing is more engaging than myths, facts, mysteries. Most students find that interesting. So my classroom environment has tons of books. We have everything we read gets video support. So we cover the audio visual learner, a hands-on learner, and we try to make that work. So the classroom should have topic, engaging visuals, books, and magazines to stimulate engagement. Strategy number two, which is planning and preparation. Always have supplemental and additional options to apply new skills and ideas. If a student is unable to read well, therefore you do an audio visual. If they're unable to audio visual, then you sit down and you go through pictographs and you go through however the student can engage. Even if you sit down one-on-one and just read simple books, or you watch videos and then you try to engage the student that way. But in conclusion, comprehensive adaptive learning points. Can we apply this to other areas in the world? Absolutely. Mapping is maps and places can include, hey, you have a last name, it's Dutch, let's study Holland, and so on and so on. Always keep a portfolio and base learning outcomes, because they leave artifacts, and the artifacts are their works, their coloring sheets, their maps they make. Even if a student completes only 2/3, by the end of a project, they should be able to look back and go, wow, look what I accomplished. And look at all those checks I got, and they should feel good about it. And then always at the end, do the artifacts reflect the outcomes? Absolutely give the students feedback and allow them to respond. Multiple areas of academic approach. Understand that in this, we read literary books. You do reading as a whole group, so everybody gets a chance to read. You develop empathy. So if one student is a poor reader, you teach other students to follow along, read along, and not to act negatively, prompt or assist the reader, but to just develop a nice classroom culture where everyone feels welcome, regardless of reading levels. Always highlight the historical factors, what was going on in the 20th century, the Bermuda Triangle. We always highlighted the idea of a news press and magazines and newspapers becoming more and more relevant. So you want to build up mysteries, and they found that interesting. critical thinking and reasoning skills. Even though they're low IQ, they can critically reason, hey, wait, that doesn't make sense. And when they make something that may seem obvious, but they make the discovery themselves, like, wait a minute, this isn't even in the Bermuda Triangle, so why is it being attributed? Then they critically think, well, if the newspapers need to make stories, then they just put it in the Bermuda Triangle to sell more papers. So those sort of things are fantastic. Then the practical approach, mathematics, geometry, mapping, and just doing that. It's just absolutely fun for most of the students to understand longitude, latitude, and be able to go around and map the world. And then we like map their favorite restaurants around. We get the longitude, latitude. We map special landmarks around the world. So it goes beyond just the Bermuda Triangle, but it's an actual learning skill that is quite fascinating. Even our hikes, when we go hiking, they find the longitude, latitude, and they enter into their phones and stuff like that. And they find that absolutely fascinating. Hands-on learning experience, absolutely. With low IQ, at-risk kids in my special education classroom, this lesson plan and recovering these fine points related to math strategies was absolutely fantastic.